Drop Duchy. This is a combination of a lot of really interesting mechanics. It's a Tetris meets city management civ-like roguelike. And I'm always all up for very unique and different takes on roguelike games, considering that there's a lot of them. And this one definitely caught my attention, and I've got to say, I have a lot to talk about. This video is going to be split into two sections. The first is going to be just kind of like a basic full-on review of the game. And then the second portion is going to be a lot more specifics, looking into more of the design intricacies and a lot of the feedback that I have. But the bottom line is, I'm going to say from the start, this game is fantastic. I want to say that up front because you'll notice that I'm going to have a lot of feedback for this game, even though I think the game is really, really solid. I just think there's a lot of things that could be improved upon. So let's just go through the usual. First, audio visuals. I think the audio visuals are great. It has a really clear art style. I love the art style of the actual non-3D images, the actual cards themselves, for especially the technology cards, which are like the passive abilities. I love the art style. They're big, they're very clear, they're beautiful, as you can see right here. This could have been such a smaller picture, but they really put a lot of effort into this stuff. And I think the 3D ones as well look fairly clear and are nice. There's a lot of details put into these. Great menu when you start the game. I mean, you know, just really got me excited to know what is going on. Even when you go through like the map itself, you know, it's a whole world. Even though it is a point and click like to the next area, it's in a 3D environment that I think is more immersive thanks to everything that's surrounding it. I will say I kind of wish that every new act was visually different, because it currently is not, if I remember correctly, and if it is, it's not very clear. I think that could be an easy addition, but it's not necessary. I think they did a really good job. The music is great. You know, it has kind of like a medieval vibe. It's still on the chiller side, even for bosses. It's a slow-paced game, which I think is fitting, but the bosses are a little bit more intense. I think the music fits really, really well. Same goes for the sound design. Completing rows with your Tetris thing feels great. All the different sounds are fairly clear and indicate really what is going on. So audio visuals, while fairly simple, I think are done really well. Now let's talk about, obviously, the gameplay. The gameplay is awesome. Amazing combination of things that create this really unique gameplay that I just have not seen before. You play Tetris, but there's a lot of added elements to it, where at first it's just a matter of just doing Tetris pieces you don't really care about, but the further along you go, the more you realize you have to keep track of the kinds of terrains, and you have to connect certain terrains to one, and then you have to put the actual buildings in the right spot, and like then you get a bunch of really specific combinations and synergies depending on which terrain touch which kind of buildings, and which buildings can do that with something else, and the enemy buildings, and whoo, there's so much going on. It can be a little overwhelming, but the more you play, the better you get at the game, and it really rewards you for just being comfortable with it. And I think it's done really well in that regard. I'm not here to talk about how the gameplay works, because there's a lot of different nuances to it, and also a lot of it is going to be discovered as you play, thanks to the progress tree, which I'll be touching on a lot more later on. The game tries to, you know, pretty much start off with very small amounts of mechanics available, and the more you play, the more you unlock actual gameplay mechanics. So it's a good way to not overwhelm the player. To be honest, at first I thought it was pretty boring. I thought the progress tree was fairly boring, because it was just like, oh, I'm just unlocking a new building. But I don't know how this game works. I don't care about unlocking a new building, but you actually very quickly realize that no, the further along you explore, the more you just unlock new ways to play the game, which is really cool. And I do think that that initial feeling of that whole progress tree being just random new unlocks is a bit unfortunate on one end, because I've actually seen early reviews showing that people would just found the game boring and just not enough going on. But the more you play, the more really it opens up more and more mechanics and different play styles and stuff. So early on, progress tree might not look very interesting, but it does get really cool. Core gameplay, ton of different play styles, really skill heavy, Also, obviously, a lot of RNG, which we'll be talking about, but overall, yeah, really good combination, I think, of RNG and skill, while being fairly intuitive at first and really needing a lot of brain power later on. Next up, I'm going to talk about the actual run itself. So throughout the runs, there's a lot of things to do, which is really cool. You're going to be choosing a lot of different buildings to add to your current run. You can only have a certain amount of them. You can unlock more and more. Each buildings will do drastically different things for different play styles. There's a lot of different synergies that mix with each other. You're going to have passive abilities. You're not going to actually have those when you first start playing the game. You have to unlock those. I'm not going to get into many spoiler things, but this one will be unlocked pretty quickly. I think that was, for me, the biggest issue when I first started playing, is not having those passives unlocked at the very start. I think could have actually been better, because the first 4 runs or so, I didn't get to the new mechanic technology cards in the progression tree, and without those passives, the game feels way more restricted. Once you have those passives unlocked, it really opens up a lot more things, and it feels really nice. There's a lot of different paths to choose from during like the actual map selection. Not only the different levels depending on the terrain you'll be facing, whether there's enemies or not, is really cool, but also the different events you're going to find. You're going to unlock more and more of these through the progress tree, and they all do very different things. So the map always feels pretty fresh. The bosses, I love the design of the bosses. Without spoiling past the first boss, the design of them are fantastic. I do wish there were more of them. I understand that would be a lot of work to implement. It's always the same 3 bosses you'll be fighting every single time. They don't change at all. I wish there were more variants to them. Maybe not having different bosses, because I understand that's a lot of work, but at least adding some variants. Like, you know, the mechanics are the same, but there's a little twist to them. And of course, the whole idea of the gameplay is creating those Tetrises. That's how you call them, like, you know, like getting all those rows. What's the point is you get currency, and the whole game is around getting a bunch of currency so you can upgrade all your buildings and all your passive abilities so you can get stronger. That's all the currency is for. But you really need to upgrade those buildings and passives, because they get way stronger. So it's a system that fuels itself, which feels great. You get more currency for upgrading your buildings. The more currency you get, the more you can upgrade them, and the stronger they are, the more currency you get. Rinse and repeat. So it's a really satisfying system, and while you're also focusing on getting currency, you also have to fight all the enemies, and the whole enemy system, I think, is great. Now, once you're at the end of a fight, you have this rock, paper, scissors system of, you know, you have your archers, you have your swordmen, and you have your axemen, and one is better against the other. 50% damage for each of them. And I've seen some people complain that this was a very basic and boring system. I kind of disagree. It is basic, but when you get further along in the run, it can get pretty complicated. There are certain scenarios where you're going to have a bunch of these archmen and a bunch of these swordmen and a bunch of these axemen, and you can fuse them, and you can also fuse the enemy ones, but you can only do it with one single line, and it can get really complicated. And really, when it does, it's really cool when you can mathematically just plan everything out. I actually think it's done really well. I really like the rock, paper, scissors system. Yeah, I've seen the system a lot, and I think this is actually one that is done really successfully. As you can see, there's a lot going on in this game, and I think that's really satisfying, all things considered. I've been playing this game a lot, and I'm just always excited to continue playing because there's more and more things to do. So the roguelike elements, once again, considering there's a lot of content throughout the actual runs, roguelike elements are great. There are some distinct builds to go for. There's not an infinite possibility. It's not like, you know, oh, I have just a bunch of attack speed and I do a bit of fire damage and I also do... No. In this game, there's just a few distinct paths you can go for. Obviously, these paths are going to be different every single run, but not drastically, right? You're going to go for a river build. You're going to go for a plain/wheat build. You're going to go for a mountain build. You're going to go for a faith build. There's a set amount, but I don't think that's... even after playing a lot, I don't think it gets too repetitive, just thanks to everything else going on. The game offers a lot of opportunities to re-roll your rewards. So even though the game does have a pretty strong RNG aspect to it, you're always going to have 3 choices every single fight afterwards, and you can re-roll those choices as many times as you want, as long as you have money, and you can find builds that can get a lot of money. You can just constantly re-roll until you get the thing you want. So there's a lot of RNG, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to try to look for the specific things that you want to go for. The design of all the passives are pretty cool. Some are much stronger than others in my opinion. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to say right now, I think some builds are way stronger than others, period. I think there can definitely be some balance tweaks. There's like certain units that use forest stuff, but that doesn't work. It just doesn't. I've unlocked all the forest stuff, and it's just so unreliable and hard to make work. I don't really get that one much, and I feel like the river builds are just way too strong. But these are balanced stuff, and it does seem like the creators are releasing patches or updates, so hopefully they will be touching on a few things. But yeah, so overall, that's my basic review of the game, is that it's really good, really unique, a lot going on. I didn't even touch on the different starting factions. All 3 different factions play drastically differently, all pretty much feeling like a brand new game mode for each of them. So really, really enjoyable game. But a game that I do think does require a lot of adjustments here and there. But this is where I want to talk about 2 major elements: quality of life and actual new elements added to the game that I think the game would really benefit. So I'm going to start with that second one, actually. I think the game would really benefit from some new additions that inherently could change certain aspects in terms of like the gameplay and the strategies and stuff, but I really do think would really help. The first of these is, and this is a big one, I think the game needs a rewind button. So in a game that has so much going on, you're going to be doing a lot of mistakes, and that happens. That's fine. But even at a high level, it doesn't matter how much you play, you're going to inherently do something you weren't planning on doing, or you just weren't expecting, or you forgot. And not having a rewind button seems like a pretty bad idea to me. I really, really hope they're going to add that eventually. For instance, I'm going to play a little gameplay footage from one of my recent runs here. And basically, you're going to see that I'm trying to adjust a river piece to fit perfectly next to a building all the way at the bottom of the screen there. And the way that the game allows you to shift pieces around to try to fit into specific positions is not very clear at all. Sometimes you can kind of shift things really well into a specific spot, sometimes you can't. Now, the more you play, the more you're going to get familiar with which spots works and which don't, and that's fine. But I still can't really figure out what will work and what doesn't. And luckily enough, there is a pseudo try again button with being able to put things into reserve and putting it back, which I'm going to talk about in a second because it's a little weird. But if you just plan around the fact that you're going to try to put a piece down there, which I did in this instance, but it doesn't work, then you're screwed. And you just couldn't have known prior whether it would have worked or not. And that's why I think a rewind button is really important. Currently, if I do a big mistake, I'm just going to be quitting out and going back by reloading my previous save file. And that's just not a great feeling. So I really think the game would benefit from just a simple rewind button, because mistakes will happen a lot. Another thing, and I think that kind of fits with this theme, is I don't understand why the pieces are slowly falling. Now, I know in Tetris that's what it does, but in this game, it doesn't really make sense to me. I feel like there should at least be an option in the menu to not have that happen. There is nothing that is time pressing in this game because of the fact that you can put pieces in reserve whenever you want an unlimited amount of time. And when you put a piece in reserve, it brings whatever piece you have next to the top of the screen, which means you can constantly shift them back and forth from reserve, and therefore it's just an infinite amount of time you have. I'm assuming that's a feature and not a mistake, but if that's the case, why are pieces slowly falling down? I would much rather just have pieces never fall, and I just have full control over when they're supposed to go down. If the game was supposed to be all about you don't have much time and you have to act fast, that's one thing. I think the game would not benefit from that personally, because I think this is a strategy game more so than time management game, especially with the amount of stuff going on. But since there's a reserve mechanic, that's not the case. So to me, I think they should just scrap this whole piece is slowly falling down, or at least give an option for players to just enable that. Another aspect, this would definitely impact the actual strategy of the game and would make it much more strategic, which I could imagine some people might not be as much in favor of, but it would reduce the amount of RNG, is I wish you could actually actively see which pieces are left in the deck during combat. Now, it tells you which kinds of pieces there are, and that's quite nice, but I think they could go even further and let you see your entire deck, not in order. So you still have the RNG of not knowing which is going to come next, but at least knowing what there is in general. And I think that's linked to another issue, which is that you can't even know which pieces are going to be there from the start. Even before starting the battle, in the home screen, it will show you the kind of terrains there are, and they're going to shift through different ones that are randomly there. But you can't click on it. You can't actually count the amount of line pieces, the amount of squares. Now, I believe it's just 2 of each, if I'm not mistaken, but that's not very clear. And this game really does require a lot of strategy, and players are going to want to know this kind of information, at least I think, and I would love to have this information. So this one I understand if not everybody would agree with me on this one, but I really think the game would be cooler if you could actively see what's in the deck left, all the pieces at all times. It's pretty big, I get it, or maybe have a card that lets you do it, or something in that regard. But the reason is because sometimes I forgot if I've used all my line pieces, and I don't know if I can fill out this massive line at the bottom, or I don't know if I have any forest pieces left, right? Like, what if I absolutely need a forest piece, but I have like 4 pieces left in my deck and I need one of them to be a forest? If one of them is a forest, I'm saved and I can go for the strategy. But if none of them are, then I'm screwed and I shouldn't go for this strategy. I kind of wish I could know that. So just a little bit more information on what is left in your deck in combat, I think would be great. And lastly, on features that I personally would love to see be added, a full-on mechanical ban. Once you've unlocked more and more things through the progress tree, it's great because there's more to play with, but you then mutter the pool. Basically, the more things you unlock, well, the more things to find. And the problem is this game heavily relies on very specific synergies, right? A building that works only with rivers, a building that only works with faith, a building that only works with forest. They're literally useless if you don't go for these builds, which means that this is a game to me that kind of needs a banning mechanic pre-game to make sure that you don't have to deal with randomly finding a bunch of river buildings because you're not going for them. Even though the river stuff is, in my opinion, the best build to go for. But I think this is one of those games that needs it, just because of the way the synergies work. That would only be included later on once you've unlocked enough things in the progress tree, right? That could actually be a progress tree unlock, funny enough. After a while, you find like an actual unlock that's banning an actual mechanic, make things a little less reliant on RNG. I think that would really help. So yeah, those are all the additional things that I think could be added to make the game a little better. Some much more important than others, in my opinion. And again, these are all my opinion. But now I want to touch on my next point, which is quality of life. I think this game really needs a lot of quality of life adjustments. And originally, I was just going to do like just a few examples and just say that's why it needs a quality of life. But I've came across so many points that I actually decided to just make an entire list of all of them that I was able to find. Not to just, again, diss on the game, but more to just show all the things that I think are important to a game to just help improve the overall experience for any player. And I think because these can easily be included, some are much smaller than others, some are much more important than others, some might not be even agreed upon with everybody. These are just the ones that I think would really help improve the game. And again, I'm saying all these because I just love talking about very specific game design stuff. And if you're making a game, then maybe, hey, these kind of notes are pretty important in my opinion. So, in no specific order, here's my list of quality of life improvements I think this game needs. First, the tutorial pages. There's a bunch of things to learn in this game. There's a huge tutorial collection, but when you go on that tutorial page, currently, it puts you at page 1, and there's a bunch of pages, and if you want to go to the most recent one, you just gotta click all the way to the very end just to see what the hell this game was telling you about that recent thing you unlocked. So, simple stuff, but these things do matter. While I'm on this subject, some bosses, again, have very specific mechanics that when you're first starting to play them, you're not gonna remember everything very clearly. So, once that tutorial page pops up, if you forgot something, you're gonna have to go back on that tutorial encyclopedia, and you don't want to go scrolling through everything. So it would be nice if just the boss information was there at all times, just as a little button to press while you're finding it, so you could just get to understand the mechanics. I will say overall, not everything is explained very well in this game, so I think these kind of things are pretty important. Zooming. I think there's a lot of moments in this game where things are really zoomed in. The progress tree, right now, if I look at the progress tree, you see how large it is, but I kind of wish I could see the full tree, because sometimes I forgot what I unlocked prior, and right now it's just a little confusing to scroll up and down, so more zooming would be great. Same for the actual run map. The map itself is beautiful, simple, but it's really nice, but it's really zoomed in. Being able to scroll up and down throughout the entire map is a little confusing. I wish you could zoom out. Just a few options just to zoom. This one is not as necessary in my opinion, but I think it would help a little bit. One that's pretty annoying, but a little complicated if you haven't played, is when you're about to get into a battle, you're going to want to upgrade your cards. And when you go to upgrade your cards, you see every single one of your cards in your collection, but it doesn't show you which ones are being selected actively for the fight. That is really annoying, in my opinion, because I don't remember which ones I'm going to be using for the battle, and I don't want to upgrade the ones that I'm not going to be using. So a simple little border that shows you which one is going to be used for this next fight, I think would help a lot. Default fast mode. There is a button, Q, right now, that lets you go fast mode, which just doubles the speed of animation. But there's no default way to just set that as permanent. You have to press Q every single time there's an animation if you want it to go faster, which after you've played this game a lot, I'm like now having a reflex of just pressing Q at all times just because I want things to go faster. Please make this a default option. I'm surprised there is not an option for that. That seems just like something they forgot to do. So hopefully that will be added. Categorizing things in your inventory. Currently, when you open your inventory, it's just a bit of a mess. I'm not too sure why certain cards are where. There doesn't seem to be an easy way of categorizing things. And sometimes I want to just see how many swordmans I have, how many archmans I have. I wish they would tell you how many productions you have, how many military you have, and which of the military units specifically you have. These kind of things would be really helpful. This one is a bit more specific, and I think only for high-level players, but potentially giving an option to have specific outlines for certain buildings during gameplay would be pretty useful. Sometimes you're going to have benefits if like a production building is close to a military building, but visually it can be a little confusing to remember which of the buildings are production and stuff like that. So I kind of wish that there would be a little blue outline for all the production buildings you have, and a little red outline for all the military things, right? Like something like that I think would be nice. Just, I feel like this game could have a lot more accessibility options, and currently there's not even a single tab for gameplay or accessibility in the option, which I think is a bit unfortunate for a game like this. I don't think every single indie game needs it, but a game with that much going on, I think is pretty important. Not being able to look at the talent tree or quests during the preparation window before a fight, I think is just a bit frustrating, because sometimes I just forget to look at my quest or my progression tree before getting into a fight, and when I press the next level, I can't go backwards. I'm like, oh shoot, I just wanted to check something and I forgot. I don't think there's any reason why that would be a problem, so I think just giving that options at all times would be great, just to see your progress tree and to see your missions before a fight. I think it was a nice little thumbs up. This does circle back to my previous point about being able to see at all times what's in your deck during combat. But before combat, you get to know the land distribution, right? You're going to have 75% trees, 25% land. But sometimes, right when I start a combat, or like a few minutes in, I forgot that distribution, what it is. And there's no way to know that anymore. Once you get into combat, you just have to remember what the distribution was. If they're not going to be adding this whole feature to see your deck, which I completely understand if they don't, at least be able to remind the player what was the land distribution, I think would be really easy to implement. Just literally putting that little number on the top right, because there's a lot of space that could be used. Just like 25%, 75%, boom, done. I touched on that one a little bit, but again, the land distribution stuff, right, is like pre-battle, you get to see individual pieces shown, but you can't click on them to see all of them. It just kind of like cycles through a new one every few seconds just to show you which ones are going to be in battle. But I want to just actually count them. I want to see all of them. I want to be able to click on the little square to show what all 4 of my forest pieces are going to be and what all 12 pieces of my planes are going to be. So I can kind of strategize that. Early game, like when you start playing the game, you're not going to worry about that, but later on, you might. I would. There's no reason why that would be a problem, considering that you can count all of them since they're cycling through. So it's not even adding more things to the game because it's already there. It's just in a fashion that's a little slow and inconvenient. And lastly, the last quality of life is not being able to see all of the possible upgrades for each building when they're at level 1. Basically, when you have a building at level 1, you can look at what the level 2 is going to do, but you're not going to be able to see what level 3 is going to do. And I think that information is pretty important because some buildings are way stronger at level 3, and others you go from 2 to 4 to 6, right? So the third upgrade is not super impactful, but you won't know that unless you've upgraded it to level 2. So I think just giving that information out to players would be really, really nice, especially since in the collection tab, you can actually see that at all times. You just can't see it while you're actually doing your upgrades during the important times where you're actually wondering whether it's worth upgrading something. And there you go. Those are all the quality of life things that I was able to find throughout my first 20 hours of playing this game. Once again, some of them are more important than others. Some you may not even agree with, but these are just my own opinions on things that I think would really improve on the game to make just the overall experience better. And if all of these or even some of these are touched on, I think I would really, really be excited about, because as you can see with so many points, the game can be a little frustrating at times when a lot of these individual points that I mentioned do collide with each other during a single run. So hopefully they will touch upon that. But again, want to reiterate, even though I did say a lot of feedback, the game is really cool and really fun, and I look forward to hopefully seeing all of these or some of these be addressed. And to finish everything off, I just want to touch on a few random more notes that I talked about. These are not just quality of life, but just a few design choices here and there that I want to bring up. Once again, each faction is really cool and unique from one another, and I really enjoy a lot of them. I will say the first faction, funny enough, it's the easiest one to play, but it's also the weakest one. But I think that's because there are a few balance tweaks here and there I would make. Once again, I think the overall field and forest stuff is just not very powerful in comparison to the things you're going to find later on, and that's the first thing you're going to be encountering. So hopefully they do add a few more like wood things, because currently I think the wood path is really underwhelming. But in any case, what I wanted to really bring up was the fact that each of the factions, when you start playing them, are extremely weak, because there's actual meta progression in terms of getting them stronger the more you play, which is quite surprising for a game that's all about strategy. I like the fact that you get stronger. It's cool. There's an actual reason to continue playing them, right? You get things from it, but they don't feel great to start playing because they're clearly underpowered. And when you've played one faction a lot and you get really strong, and then you play the new faction and you're extremely weak no matter how well you play it, that's not a great feeling in my opinion. I'm not too sure what I would do to change that, because I do appreciate and enjoy the way that they deal with pacing overall, but I wish that factions didn't start that weak. Maybe add a little less meta progression to them. Heck, even add cosmetics at the end instead of all this really powerful stuff. I mean, that's a whole conversation. But yeah, I just think that they they get too strong in comparison to how weak they are when you start playing them. And that's a bit of a shame for a strategy game, in my opinion. Some of the progress tree paths, I think, are weak, but you have to go through them in order to unlock the future stuff. And you don't really have a choice, right? So you might not want to buy a lot of the religion stuff, which you'll get to later on, but you have to get through them in order to unlock more stuff, right? Now, without the possibility of banning things, which hopefully they will add, that's not a great feeling either, because of the fact that you're spending your resources on something you don't want just because it doesn't sound great, like something that just gives you a little bit more health in a game like this is not really fun or very useful, in my opinion. So you have to unlock it, and it's going to be added to your pool permanently, but you don't have a choice because you want to unlock more things. So I wish they could adjust that by either having more paths through the progress tree or by just simply allowing people to be able to ban certain types of mechanics. There's no clear benefit to playing the harder difficulties. There's a very clear difficulty difference between easy, normal, and hard. And then there's two other difficulties which I haven't even started on. Easy is really easy, normal is quite challenging, and hard is quite challenging as well. I'm definitely going to try to play the hardest difficulty, but there's no benefit to any of it. And in a game that has meta progression, that's unfortunate. Now, I understand why, because, you know, to my understanding, everything is calculated, so all the missions equate to you being able to unlock everything in the progress tree. So I get it with the current design of the game that's not going to work very well, but I wish that you would get something for doing hard mode, because currently as well is, if you want to unlock the whole progress tree really quickly and get all your missions, play on easy mode. Because, again, you also don't get any penalties from playing on easy mode. Which, if you're going to have a meta progression heavy game, then there needs to be differences, in my opinion, between the difficulties. Because otherwise it just feels a little too cheap for someone to play everything on easy mode just because they want to unlock things really, really quickly, while someone just wants to have fun and play things on hard mode because they like a challenge, but they don't unlock anything. So I wish that was adjusted somehow. And that's it. That's my entire rant. So in conclusion, Drop Duchy is really unique, fun roguelike that has a lot of things going for it. Really fun game that I think can improve in many, many different little areas. Nothing drastic, all things considered. All the things I've been touching on could be considered fairly small, but I do think that all of them combined would, if looked upon, I think would really improve the game to be honestly one of the better strategy / puzzle-ish roguelikes out there. I don't even know how to call this game, and that's why it's so cool. It's unique and fun. So if this game looks interesting in any way, I would highly suggest trying it out. Again, it is a pretty hard game at first. There's a lot of things going on. It's actually a hard game overall. There's a lot of things to keep track of, but it's really fun, and it has a lot of replayability, and I think this game is only going to get better and better, because my understanding is that they're going to be continuing to update it throughout the weeks and months, and hopefully they do touch upon certain things that I've brought up. I would hope so. If not, then that'd be a shame, but again, the game is still very enjoyable. So yeah, that's about it.